I want to give a quick video about how we learn. This is something which, well, we think it's common sense, but no one ever talks about this, maybe the odd cognitive scientist. So I'm going to go through some areas. So there are four major ways I can categorize how we learn: entrainment, repetition, attraction, and resonance. And usually we learn from a combination of these four, and I'll explain how they work. Entrainment is the immersion of an individual in a situation, what I'll call a field, and it's where something is always practiced in the same way. It could be the way your parents express emotion towards each other. So as you're immersed in this day in, day out, your expectations will be entrained to believe that this is the normal way to communicate. Another example could be that your house is always very, very clean, and this becomes your normal, and everything else is measured against this. Now, this learning happened by living and experiencing the consequences of this cleanliness. Your environment is training you to expect and react in a certain way. This learning later manifests as an expectation held whenever approaching new physical environments, and the new experience will be compared and measured against the entrained experience and a judgment made based upon the differences detected. Repetition, as the name implies, is the repeated iteration of knowledge. Now, this could be via sound and speech, such as what you use for learning poems and scripts, formula, mathematical or chemical. It could be visual, in the semiotics, the signs and symbols embedded in the environment and constantly reinforced, well, such as the Illuminati programming in the pop music videos with colours, hand gestures and artifacts. It could be behaviourally, in the way someone responds to you, if someone's constantly kind or aggressive, dismissive or welcoming. It could be what you eat and educate your sense of taste to. Garlic or no garlic, chili or mild spice. The more something is repeated, the stronger the natural and neural pathway is formed in the brain, and the more unconscious resulting behaviour becomes. You just do it because that's what you do. Repetition can result in very, very deep programming, especially if it's embedded in the environment and you no longer question or divert from it. But unlike entrainment, repetition is more specifically targeted. Entrainment surrounds you. Repetition occurs with frequency and very often specificity. Attraction, as the name implies, is when you're moved towards a subject area, an object, an idea, a person or experience because you feel compelled to. There's something about that attractive thing which is a fit to you. We walk around as though we've got shapes in our psyche, nerve endings, mental patterns which fit to other corresponding shapes. These are the result of the sum of our entrainment and what we bring with us before birth in the form of our uniquely structured DNA. We have tendencies to the way we react with our likes, our interests, our avoidances. Attraction is utterly based on our emotional state. We reach for an experience because it fits to how we currently feel. We don't even have to move towards or reach these experiences to learn. They naturally present themselves in our lives. What we notice in our environment, and that now includes cyberspace, is that what is nearest to our current mental and emotional state is what we notice. We learn as we engage with the experience and add to our mental vocabulary of experience, much as an onion has many fine layers. Now, resonance takes this a step further. If you can imagine each thing in the universe is made up of a collection of energy arranged in a particular matrix of Planck's, atoms, electrons, protons and neutrons, each of which is an enfoldment of energy trapped momentarily into a form. That could be thought, sound, light, those are waves, and physical things, that's a slower wave, as well as people and animals. Then it makes sense that each thing has its own unique, often complex, energy signature. When we perceive something, we're experiencing this energy signature and interpreting it as vision, hearing, feel or scent. That means that we too, as complex energy systems made up of trillions of cells, and each of those of trillions of miniature particles of wave energy, have the means to interpret energy signatures through our senses. We think we're perceiving rain, wet, water falling from the clouds, yet we're actually interpreting energetic signatures in the holographic field. Resonance learning is when an external thing, thought, or experience has a resonance to our own internal energetic structure. There's a recognized similarity to some of the structure within ourselves. We feel the connection. We understand its rightness as a fit to ourselves, and we actively encourage more of it if it feels good. Traditionally, this would be labelled as intuition, hunches, just because. natural or fate, the woo-woo area of knowledge mainstream science likes to sidestep because they've not yet embraced the knowledge we have of the structure of the universe from a quantum level. I want to talk a little bit about how learning is established in our neural networks. Those are the networks of nerve endings we have in our brain. That is not where knowledge is stored, but it is a means to access knowledge, and important that we look at it briefly. Entrainment shapes our neural network through familiarity. Neurons fire and collect for one experience. Now, if that is repeated, similar patterns are formed, and if this repetition is consistent over a period of time, a proper network of pathways build up. The neural network is not the learning, it's the hard wiring which allows us to access our energetic or emotional reaction to the experience. Antenna-like, the actual thought is energy and as such isn't stored in the brain but accessed by it. In a similar way, repetition creates grooves of thought as neurons receive similar stimulus again and again, a bit like how sound is recorded onto a record. If repetition is not kept up from either the environment or the experience isn't used anymore, the pathway will eventually be overwritten with new neural pathways. The permanence of repetition depends on its frequency. It can also depend on its intensity, and that's where negative emotional experiences can seem to go on and on and on in our minds because the emotion was so terrible it has made a deep groove or connectivity of neurons. It's not impossible to be overwritten. Now, attraction works with what we have actively operating in our mental field. The more we use something and the stronger we feel about it, the more prominent that becomes in our psyche. The subject demands more space in our neural network because of this frequency and intensity and overrides other less prominent ideas and thought forms. Our thoughts move in the groove they are accustomed to, and we recognize fit to these prominent thoughts in the world outside us with a sensation of goodness, rightness. The more we use something, the easier it is for us to recognize it elsewhere. Attraction isn't about literally pulling information to us out of the thin air, but it's moving through time and space where endless possibilities already exist, and seeing, hearing, feeling, tasting, or touching those which we know. Attraction does become repetitive unless we know how to steer our predominant thoughts. That's why the adult's responsibility is to provide a huge variety of stimulus, structured and unstructured, to the young child. Children need to develop neural pathways to vast numbers of emotions, experiences and tangible things so they can sort and refine this according to their own internal landscape and develop as they were intended, highly individually with the complexities of their thought. Resonance occurs from existing mental structures which find their equivalent and similar in the world about them through recognition. This means that the DNA we're born with sets the tone for the initial resonance in our lives. Our physical structure, laid out by our unique DNA, has tendencies already prescribed within it. From birth, we'll resonate with certain things and not with others, regardless of the entrainment and repetition into which we are immersed often. Twins with identical DNA can, however, gravitate to wildly different occupations and attitudes despite being brought up in the same household. In this case, it's the timing of the experience, their placement in space and time, and the subtle differences of treatment from the environment which become strong enough to form distinctive personalities when interacting with their original source material. Remember though, DNA is the carrier of the energetic matrix of instructions making up a body, but consciousness contains the DNA, and that's where also you can have, of course, differences, even though there are two people with the same apparent structure. It's this energy which arranges these subtle differences in behaviour, placement, in time and reaction. Twins are linked, but nevertheless they are separated sufficiently through space and time, and the resulting difference in perception leads, thankfully, to individuation. Now, resonance is the building block of expectation. Mostly we don't know specifically what we've learned to expect or not. We simply see what we're getting and not getting in life. Resonance as an aspect of consciousness can be directed and reformed to bring us different experiences. We can do this through willful intervention in our neural pathway development in the form of imagination. Imagination is in fact a fifth level of learning. It's a teach oneself. The what-if game of the universe, which is imagination, sets us onto a path of new discovery. Imagination creates open-ended neural systems. where we don't know the full picture or experience, we've instead used what we know to posit something slightly different from what we had before. It's like going along the same path and letting it unfold a little further each time. This lays open gateways of perception to see and recognize experience which is new and fresh, and that expands our learning from what we've been given by others in our environment. So using the power of the imagination to build new gateways and pathways is essential to expanding our thinking. So contrary to traditional belief where education is based upon rote repetition and entrainment, these are the only two ways to proceed, we're beginning to recognize that what makes us profoundly human, innovative and expanding is our ability to attract, to resonate with, and to imagine. Where does this impetus for imagination come from? Imagination's typically been portrayed as an active engagement. Read any children's book and they do their best to lay out a linear, albeit matrix-like scrapbook of reference where our child hero taps into. They see literally photographs in their mind or a book or a filing system. Imagination is really not like that. It's actually a more passive occupation, more akin to the word receptivity. People in the imagination state enter into theta wavelengths in their brain activity, the same as those who meditate. They are in an altered state, where images, sounds, concepts, even scents and sensations enter the perceiver. From where do they come? Traditionally, it's said to be a recombination of all we've already experienced, churning away there in our little brains, stored there in those cells. But we now know that the imaginative state exists when we're tapping into the morphogenetic field, or the quantum field, consciousness, where all information is present in energy form. Some people call this the Akashic records, you'll come across that too. And it's just awaiting a translation through our minds based upon what we have already going on in there, formed by attraction, formed by resonance, and a little bit of repetition and entrainment, often sadly. Entirely new information can be received in this state, but it always does have a corresponding fit to what's already there because of attraction and resonance. And that's how we learn. That's the true way a human being learns. That's why we have to provide different kinds of environments for our children to learn in.